Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm stupid.
You're stupid?
I have allergies. Allergies make you stupid.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. So I'll have an advantage. I mean, should we disagree over anything?
You have even more of an advantage than usual.
Oh, Mickey, that's so nice of you.
But I've taken Sudafed.
Oh, but that speeds you up. That's an advantage.
Well, it almost compensates.
That's a performance-enhancing drug, Mickey.
But the police are on the alert for Sudafed orders in my neighborhood.
So have you had any more celebrity encounters in Hollywood lately?
No. My encounters with celebrities are reduced to looking at thumbnail photographs of them on PatrickMcMullen.com.
Beg your pardon?
But you can actually find photos of all the celebrity parties the very next day.
Oh, good.
So the celebrities who I used to hang with, I now look on the web and
on
see
Flickr or something.
See where they were.
Yeah, that's pretty pathetic.
I did go to the Radar party.
Oh, Radar magazine.
Radar magazine. It was pretty much celebrity free. Andre Balaz stopped by.
Well, with a name like that, if he's not famous, he should be. I don't know who he is.
He's the guy. He's the hotelier who's dating Uma Thurman. But then it turned out he owned the hotel that the party was being held at, so maybe he was just like inspecting the rugs or something. But anyway,
yeah, probably bussing tables. So, well, you know, I had a little kind of near brush with a celebrity.
Tell us about it.
I mean, let me put it this way, Mickey. Guess who I'm standing up to be with you today? Okay, guess who is left cooling his heels so that I can do this with you?
Kofi Annan.
No.
Bill Clinton.
No. But does the name Anderson Cooper, CNN superstar, mean anything to you, Mickey?
Pretty cool. What, I know what he sees in you. What do you see in him?
Celebrity. Actually, I couldn't be with him at this moment. That part was a lie, but here's what's true. I got an email from somebody on his show about an hour ago, and they're doing this thing related to the Jesus tomb controversy, you know?
Right.
And they're doing a produced segment on science in the Bible, and they wanted to film me for that. So it wouldn't have been me with Anderson himself, as I now call him. I now call him Anderson now that I've gotten this email. And in fact, as you know, with these produced segments, it probably would not have been me at all. I probably would have been left on the cutting room floor, right?
Right. It certainly wouldn't have been him. He would have been nowhere in the vicinity.
Exactly. But the produced segment might have shown up in the vicinity of him. That would be my brush with greatness had I survived the editing. In any event, I said, no, sorry, I have a date with Mickey. And on this show, I will be discussing the Jesus tomb thing, and I will say what I think are the interesting things I have to say, including one thing that I think no one has said, and I'll leave it for you to judge whether this would have survived the editorial process.
Okay, well, I can be your Anderson Cooper for the day.
You're better than that, man.
Thank you. That was a totally pathetic unraveling of your brush with celebrity.
Well, I figure you lead with the thunder, you know, and then you do your qualifying in the later paragraphs. So maybe I did the qualifying too soon.
You've learned from the Iraqi government. That was a segue. Whoa.
Whoa, that was good. We going to talk about Iraq?
Well, the Iraqi government always proclaims things are wild successes, and then we found out the grim truth. So far, it seems to me the surge is not a failure. There are all these stories in the press that the nightly body count has been reduced from 40 to 10. That's not nothing.
Is that true in Baghdad?
Yeah.
But isn't that partly because the means of... You mean the bodies they find in the morning?
Right. It's not clear if they stop killing them or just stop throwing them out in the street.
Exactly. If there's more bombings and fewer militia-style executions, then the body count could go down. That, in that sense, even while the number of deaths rises. And I think there have been more bombings, although I hear they've been pushed toward the outskirts of Baghdad.
But clearly the really evil thing are these militia killings, and you reduce them, and you've basically. So the bombings are not the really evil things? I think the bombings... If you die in a bombing, you have the reassuring knowledge that it wasn't evil that killed you? The bombings are people trying to provoke the militia killings, I think. I mean, there were always bombings, and then everything started to go to hell when the Shiites rose up and started ethnically cleansing. Not sure I totally follow that logic, but
You know, one interesting thing, one reason this is kind of, apparently there's a story today about a raid that bagged some Shiite militiamen who had allegedly been doing, had these torture chambers in Baghdad. One dynamic that may be unfolding, apparently, according to this New York Times story, is Muqtada al-Sadr is using the surge to get rid of people who were being disloyal to him anyway. There had been these stories about his militia fragmenting, and there being these stray and renegade elements. So apparently he's told the faithful among his troops to respect the surge and not do anything bad, and meanwhile he's providing names and addresses of the people he once killed who used to be faithful to him. So
right, but that seems like a
win-win, man.
That seems like not a bad thing on the grounds that it's my theory on killing spiders in my house was always you keep bringing in bigger and bigger spiders to eat the smaller spiders, and then eventually you get a spider so big you can just stab it with a knife. If we consolidate the people we have to negotiate with on the other side, so it's just Muqtada al-Sadr, and he has control, then it's much easier to broker a peace than if it's fragmented with 10 Shiite factions, none of whom are in control of anybody.
And I think it's safe to say that that's the first time that particular metaphor has been applied to this situation, right?
Maybe the last time.
Possibly the last time.
But it is interesting. There was this bomb that attempted to kill the vice president of Iraq, who's a Shiite. And he is now apparently, according to Juan Cole, gone and accused another cabinet official or another high member of the government in the ministry he was visiting with actually setting the bomb. And so not only are the government officials killing each other or trying to kill each other, but apparently this is Shiite on Shiite violence. The other minister is also a Shiite. So there is a shakeout of score settling on the Shiite side, I think.
It is bad stuff. But I'm sure this all fits into your reassuring spider scenario.
No, that was a discourse. Well, you agree with the spider scenario. You agree that...
It seems very tight either way, like all these little things get eaten until there's a big thing. That seems great.
No, I mean, I think you have said before that if Muqtada al-Sadr is consolidated as our only foe on the Shiite militia side, that's a good thing.
Wait, if what? I'm sorry.
If he actually has control of the Shiite militias, then you can...
Well, yeah, no, I said the fragmentation, I mean, chaos is a harder thing to overcome than some degree of order. Yeah, you would like some degree of order if you're trying to bring people to the table, absolutely.
I mean, if you want these negotiations that Bush is now seems to have agreed to enter into with Iran and Syria to bear fruit, they have to be somebody for Iran and Syria to pressure in Iraq in a way that will have some results.
You would like there to be a fairly small number of parties that have firm representation, yes.
Yes, well, so there you go. So you were just...
Could be good, and this could be a watershed, and I applaud the Bush administration for finally getting around to the idea that maybe talking to Iran and Syria makes sense. It's years late, but it's better late than never.
What I don't understand is why, like Steve Clemens has a blog on Huffington Post, and presumably on his own blog, about how, well, maybe this is the prelude to the large formal regional conference. Why are diplomats so concerned with formalities? I mean, if you want to cut a deal, you go to the men's room and cut a deal. You don't need a big formal conference. You only have the formal conference after you've cut the deal. So you can't judge the progress of the negotiations by the external appearance of, gee, was it in a hotel? Was it in a big conference? Were there high-level...
Well, without even pausing to ask what kind of deals you cut in the men's room, I would say that to the extent that it's multi-party, you actually do, it can't be done so informally, so easily. It's one thing to do things bilaterally without anybody knowing, but the more people you get together, you want to get together, the harder it is to do.
The harder it is to do informally.
Yeah.
But, I mean, aside from Yalta and various things like that, are there ever cases where the deal is actually cut at the formal event? Isn't it always cut beforehand?
Oh, well, I think, yeah, I think formal events lead to all kinds of informal conversations, but nobody said this is even going to be formal in the sense of public. So maybe that the event is the real discussion. I mean, I don't know.
It just struck me that, again, that we don't really know, we don't really know whether negotiations are going on, whether they're making progress. You can't really judge from until you read the TikTok in Time and Newsweek.
No, but it does seem safe to say that even if there had been, whispered discussions with Iran or Syria, that nobody's gotten them. I don't think we've gotten them all together. And also, I think Steve is talking about the possibility that, this will ultimately address not just issues pertaining to the war, but larger issues involving Lebanon and Israel and the Golan Heights and the whole shebang.
I see. Okay. Well, anyway, it's the situation is basically still the same. The surge seems to be tamping down violence in Baghdad. But nobody knows what comes next, and it's encouraging that the Bush administration at least seems to be, showing external signs of having thought about what comes next.
Yeah, it's an improvement. I mean, it's a sign of how little we've come to expect of the Bush administration, that everybody gets all excited when they do the obvious thing that people have been, that like Flint Leverett has been arguing for God knows how long. But like I said, better late than never. Interesting. I came across an interesting way to blame Bush for an even larger set of phenomena than I had previously blamed him for, related to this.
That's hard to believe that that's possible, but go ahead.
I know. I work night and day at this, but this lets me plow some new ground. It has to do with the Israeli-Lebanon war last summer. That came in response to Hezbollah's provocations, and which seems to have been kind of a loser for both the U.S. and Israel. And the standard criticism, which I subscribed to, was that the response to the provocations was ill-advisedly, large scale and enduring. But this is an argument that the provocation itself may have been caused in an indirect way by the Iraq War. Okay? I think I'm correctly interpreting the comments that Vali Nasser made on the Charlie Rose show that I think have this implication. And what he said was this, that, as we know, there's now this big kind of increasingly regional Sunni-Shiite rift. And that really starts, at least as a conspicuous, prominent thing, with the Iraq War, with Al-Qaeda in Iraq choosing this as a strategy, right, to foment these tensions.
Right.
Now, from Hezbollah's point of view, this was in some ways very problematic, because Hezbollah had been trying to cultivate a Sunni Palestinian constituency, right? Mm-hmm. By sympathizing with Hamas. So a rift like this was a scary thing politically for Hezbollah, and this gave Hezbollah an incentive to regain the enthusiastic support of Sunnis in Palestine. And the way you do that is you provoke Israel, and then you're seen standing up to Israel. What do you think of that theory? So we encouraged... we inadvertently, by invading Iraq, inadvertently triggered this Sunni-Shiite split, and that led Hezbollah, in order to shore up its Sunni Palestinian support, to provoke Israel.
Well, but I know you're going to try to have it both ways. In other words, you have previously argued that the Sunni-Shiite split is a bad thing. So if Hezbollah does something that cements support among Sunnis and bridges that gap, that should be a good thing if the split is a bad thing.
Well, no, but not if it entails, a serious erodes the strategic position of both Israel and America, which it certainly did in the case of Israel, I think. I would rather have just kind of left things the way they were. Not create the rift, not create Hezbollah's reaction to the rift.
It's weird, because the Sunni-Shiite rift is emerging as a neocon talking point of the success of the Iraq War. In other words, they originally wanted to set up a stable, unitary Iraqi state that would be our ally in the Middle East. Okay, they don't think that's going to happen anymore. But they think, hey, we have the Sunnis and Shiites fighting each other. That's a strategic victory for the United States. Yeah. And they also think gee, the Sunni states who we've always had to kowtow to, like Saudi Arabia, are now terrified of the growing Shiite power in Iraq and Hezbollah, and they're desperate for our help in a way that they weren't before. So, you could see us saying, well, okay, if you want our help, shut down all those madrasas that you're funding around the world that are preaching anti-American, ideology.
Wait, you're saying the Sunni states are desperate for our support because they so fear the Shiites?
Yes.
Well, I mean, we're desperate for their support, Mickey. We're in this mess in Iraq, which can probably only be solved with the support with the help of that, and that's what these new negotiations will be about, the help of both the Sunni states and the Shiites. And in fact...
Is that worse than the status quo ante when basically we didn't have much leverage over them and they were funding all these madrasas and using their oil power to intimidate
Well, again,
us,
your claim that it's we who have the leverage over them is something I'm inclined to question. I mean, and an example came recently when the Saudis brokered this deal between Hamas and Fatah in Palestine. And, by doctrine, we oppose that. I mean, according to our past, statements, we are trying to isolate Hamas, in a way that I think is ham-handed and counterproductive, but we're trying to do it. But the Saudis came and said, no, we don't like this. We want to put these two together. And if you saw Condi Rice's reaction, it was kind of mixed. I mean, for whatever reason, and possibly because she didn't think she could afford to alienate Saudi Arabia, she did not side entirely with Israel's out-and-out rejection of that. She's kind of trying to have it both ways. I mean, nominally, yes, we have not changed our position. We don't recognize any role of Hamas in the government, blah, 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 blah. But if you look at the kind of shuttle diplomacy she seems to be poised to want to kind of sustain in a vague way, it actually, I think, implicitly acknowledges that Hamas will have something to say about the whole thing.
So there are all these other factors, like the desire to solve the Israeli-Palestinian dispute at work at that thing. I don't see what that means that we don't have any leverage with Saudi Arabia across the board.
When the Saudis first brokered that deal, I thought to myself, can we really afford to reject this and just slap the Saudis in the face, given how much we need their help now in the region? And, we didn't really slap them in the face, I would say. I would say we restrained from doing what you might have expected from Bush in days past. Now, my actual view is not that we have the leverage over them or they have the leverage over them. Over us. It's a symmetrically highly interdependent relationship now with them, and in fact it is in a way with Iran. And I mean, in terms of all three of us having a stake in the fighting in the region not getting totally out of control.
But they have more than they have more than just a stake in not having the fighting get out of control. They have a big Shiite minority in their country
that's one reason they don't want to get out of control.
Lives in the oil fields. But the question is, in assessing this emerging neocon claim, is the situation worse for us now than it was before, or better?
Before what? Before the rift?
In terms of leverage over the Saudis, it seems to me we didn't have much leverage before. They would raise the supply of oil and send us a little note saying Happy Independence Day. It's not clear that our leverage isn't greater now than it was before.
Greater because you think they need us against the Shiites.
Yeah.
Like, what are we going to do to help? Like, you mean our army is going to keep the Shiites at bay?
Well, according to this guy, they want us to attack Iran's nuclear facilities for them. Yes.
Well, I doubt that we're going to kind of, do that tomorrow in exchange for something from the Saudis, but...
I hope not, but...
I mean, that's not the kind of thing I think we'd do as a favor, really.
But the argument is that there are some things we can do as favors for them, and, it is mutually independent, but at least we have some leverage over them as opposed to vice versa. I'm just saying that I think that's going to be a meme, a neocon meme.
Yeah. No, they like, look, absolutely. They like, I think they like the Sunni Shiites. There's something in them that likes part of the Sunni Shiite split. They like, I think, the Fatah-Hamas tension in Palestine. You know, I think they're ultimately wrong in both cases. And anyway, this Vali Nasser scenario I trotted out is an example of how they may be wronger than they realize, that the Sunni-Shiite split had this really unfortunate consequence for Israel's strategic position if it did indeed trigger the Lebanese war.
But since when do you sympathize with Israel's strategic position?
Oh,
you're putting yourself in the role of a position you don't agree with. You think it's great that Hezbollah and Hamas came together. It gives Israel some
my goal
party to negotiate.
is for there to be a lasting settlement in Israel and to have an end to the violence. That's what's profoundly in America's interest and in Israel's interest. And if Israel will marshal its strategic position wisely, I'm all in favor of that position not eroding. And perhaps naively, I hold the hope that someday America will encourage Israel to use its strategic position wisely.
But does it help or hurt achieve that end of the violence if Hamas and Hezbollah get together? It seems to me it helps achieve that, so you're for it.
For Hamas and Hezbollah to get together helps achieve what?
It helps.
No, it absolutely doesn't. Because it, well, first of all, it's a tremendous facilitator of neocon rhetoric that seems plausible, right? It allows him to say, look, it's everyone against Israel and America. Hezbollah and, it gets back to the fact that there is this non-zero-sum relationship between radicals among Muslims and radicals in America and Israel. This is a really old story that the far right, say in Israel, it's actually in their political interest. I'm not saying they do it consciously, but their policies have the effect of fueling support for radicals in the occupied territories, and that cements domestic support for the Israeli right. And the same thing works on the other side, which is that the Palestinian radicals, if they can provoke the Israeli right into killing Palestinian civilians, that shores up support for the Palestinian radicals. So there is this non-zero-sum game between what I would call the radical fringe on both sides, among Muslims on the one hand, and what I would call right-wing radicals in Israel and America, where, if you look at their political positions, they keep mutually sustaining each other's political positions. That's what I'm against. And the united front of Hezbollah and Hamas is part of that game. We should not encourage that, because
I think your whole point was that we should not delegitimize Hamas and bring them in, and this is an agreement that's bringing them in, and you say it's Condi rights have to eat crow over the fact that it brings them in, so you should be for it. I don't understand.
Wait, you're talking about two different things. The Hezbollah-Hamas alliance is largely, I don't see the relationship between that and what you just said. Yes, I do think America should give up on isolating Hamas.
Well, and this agreement de-isolates them, doesn't it?
What agreement?
The Hamas-Hezbollah agreement. The problem with my crude understanding was that...
Wait. There's Hamas-Fatah and there's Hamas-Hezbollah. What are you talking about?
Good point. Never mind.
You did a great job of getting me animated, though, Mickey. That was really good. We should confuse terminology more often.
People will go off on the emotion of it and they completely ignore the fact.
Oh man, I can't believe that was all for nothing. So you weren't proposing the stupid idea that I would favor Hamas-Hezbollah alliance.
I do think. No, I wasn't. I do think that.
Mickey, I'm tired. I have to go take a nap. That took a lot out of me.
Okay, sorry. I do think that it did occur to me that if Hezbollah and the Shiites gain custodianship of the Palestinian cause, and this is respected by Sunnis, that helps breach the Sunni-Shiite gap. Am I crazy?
That helps do what?
It helps heal the Sunni-Shiite gap. In other words, there's sort of a, depending on whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, but if say, Sunnis in Iraq like the Shiites were because they're defending the Palestinians, that might reduce tensions in Iraq. Is that insane?
Oh, I'm just not sure I followed it all. I mean, the first part,
Hezbollah is perceived as having won a military victory over Israel.
Right.
So, to the extent that that makes them the champions of a pan-Arab cause, i.e. the Palestinians, the Sunnis in Iraq will hate them less.
Well, that, as I said, is in a way what Hezbollah may have been after. Yes, although they may have been less focused on the Sunnis in Iraq than Sunnis in Palestine and elsewhere.
Right, I'm saying that may not be such a terrible thing.
Well, again, I think it's so bad when Hezbollah and Hamas are seen by us and by Israel more and more as this united radical front. I think that's so bad, partly because of the kind of rhetoric it empowers in Israel and America, that I do not agree.
Well,
I think I do not agree, but it's the first time I've heard that proposition put like that, so I'll sleep on it.
Okay, well, I should get out of the Middle East quagmire before I embarrass myself further.
Oh, I don't know. I think that particular item may last us a couple of weeks.
Don't dig a link to it, please.
Mickey, the wonderful thing about online video is it's forever. Everything we do is forever.
I don't know. I think my lawyers will have to get on the case.
Hezbollah, Fatah, they both start with either an F or an H. I mean,
Okay. Time for a new subject. I got to ring the bell here. Dick Cheney was our next subject.
He was.
And you were going to vituperate against him.
I guess. It's just too easy. I mean, trouble just follows the guy, right? I mean, he goes to Pakistan. I mean, the backdrop is actually, he had a while ago managed to antagonize Russia in what I thought was a gratuitous way, just in the sense that public condemnations, kind of rarely get you what you're after. They just annoy people, and he kind of did that in this fluid moment when we were trying to get their support for UN sanction. And then quite recently, he does this dissing of China. He says, last month's anti-satellite test and China's continued fast-paced military build-up are less constructive and are not consistent with China's stated goal of a peaceful rise. Now, excuse me. First of all, China had been advocating a ban on anti-satellite tests for a long time, and we had been resisting, okay? So finally, they tested an anti-satellite weapon. I'm not sure we can get really indignant about that, okay? Secondly, their fast-paced military buildup, is not consistent with China's stated goal of a peaceful rise. Well, is our having the largest military in the history of the universe consistent with our claim to want world peace? I actually think it is. I mean, I actually think we kind of would like that. But the idea that having a big military discredits any aspirations to remain peaceful is just a crazy idea, it seems to me, for an American leader to be promulgating.
Doesn't Cheney sort of play a bad cop role? And isn't it good to have a bad cop around?
What good is? How does it work? All it does is empower nationalists in China who will resist cooperation with America on anything we want to cooperate with China on.
Well, the bad cops play a traditional role of they encourage you to talk to the good cops. So if
the classic role,
Bush goes to China and says, if you do this and this, I have this crazy guy Cheney. He's constantly saying these horrible, provocative things. You don't want to give him more to go crazy about, do you? So let's talk.
Well, I mean,
and he could do the same thing with Iran. Say, look, Cheney wants me to bomb you, but I really don't. So let's talk.
I think the idea. I mean, that's actually not totally implausible. That they've got this guy out there whose job is to go out every day and convince you that he should be institutionalized. I mean, the crazy, the history of this. What are the classic examples of, I think of Nixon wanting the North Vietnamese to believe that it was either Nixon or North Vietnamese or Eisenhower and North Korean. Somebody fostered the belief in one of these northern areas.
There was the famous case of the North Vietnamese. I think Kissinger even said that it was a virtue to have them think you were a little crazy.
Think we were crazy, and I think we may have fostered the belief. It's plausible. What's not plausible to me, I mean, the trouble with it is that it's plausible, is that it would actually be a coherent strategy. The idea of anything that coherent emerging from this administration strikes me as implausible. I mean, I don't think, the idea of Bush kind of orchestrating that, rather than this administration just being a chaotic war among these various elements,
Whether it's orchestrated or not doesn't really matter. If they make lemonade out of lemons, now they've provoked a Shiite-Sunni split, so they're going to say, hey, this is a great development. See what we did? But it's not clear, although some people claim they intended that all along. It's not clear that they did intend that all along.
Well, this administration certainly has lots of opportunities to make lemonade out of lemons because of all the lemons it leaves lying around. But I don't know. I mean, the way a bad cop actually works is he has some actually bad thing he can do to you, and they threatened that he is going to do it. This kind of rhetoric is not really a bad thing. Now, I guess you're suggesting that it makes it more credible to the Chinese that Cheney could keep America from doing some good thing, or Cheney could make America do some bad thing. But this isn't the bad thing, right? I don't know. It strikes me as... Anyway, if we could follow Cheney a little further. Now, so he goes to Pakistan, like a week ago or something, and finally, as if he's been listening to us, which I think is pretty unlikely, but he finally delivers a reprimand privately instead of publicly to Musharraf, but Musharraf is still so annoyed that according to the New York Times, the Pakistani government fired back with really intemperate rhetoric and then later moderated it. So, and I was kind of puzzled by that. I was thinking, wait a second, if you did this in private, why bother? Then I saw this item from the aforementioned Steve Clemens saying sarcastically, I'm sure that Cheney's presence in Islamabad is a huge help bolstering President Musharraf and helping shore up support for the Pakistani government and its president against growing influence of the Taliban and al-Qaeda in the mountainous regions of Pakistan. I think that's right. I mean, mere association with Cheney in particular is probably a sufficient political liability to Musharraf that, he's just dissing us to somewhat disassociating with it. He would rather Cheney not show up, I think.
Well, I understand. You're very respectful of the power of rhetoric to channel, and dissipate emotions when the Pakistanis do it. When they denounce Cheney, you say, well, that's just their rhetoric. But when Cheney uses intemperate rhetoric for the same purpose, you think he's horrible. Rhetoric is a relatively nonviolent way to vent emotions in a constructive way. Happens all the time. Why can't Cheney do it?
Well, I mean, it is arguably, I don't know, venting. It seems to me like a nation should have enough self-control so that it doesn't have to its diplomatic apparatus doesn't have to vent. I mean, venting is something we do by virtue of the unfortunate nature of human nature, right? And we get it out of our systems. Our diplomatic apparatus should be under more discipline.
It's a statement from the Pakistani president isn't part of his diplomatic office?
I'm not applauding what he said, Mickey. I'm just taking it as an indicator of what this is looking like to them and whether Cheney is doing any good. I would call that the kind of the opposite of compliance with whatever Cheney was asking for, which I know what he was asking for. He's asking for them to crack down on their radicals. Now, it could conceivably be, give Musharraf the cover to crack down a little or something, but...
Well, sometimes actual scientific proof, bears on this. If we show people we have photos of missiles in Cuba, then we know there are missiles in Cuba. If Cheney says he knows that the Pakistanis are letting the Taliban run wild in Waziristan, then we don't know what he brought with him in his briefcase. That's the problem. And sometimes that might help, despite the negative effects his very presence has.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me the whole problem is, we don't really have the equivalent of the photos. I mean, the Pakistanis claim that the bulk of the Taliban apparatus is now actually located in Afghanistan, not in Pakistan. And I don't know how to sort that out, and I don't trust this administration any longer on matters like this. The other thing I don't trust them on is the judgment of how much Musharraf can actually afford to do by way of antagonizing the radicals. I mean, most reasonable people, I think, agree he does have a little bit of a political quandary here. There are these radical elements.
Yeah, right. No, I understand.
it's a very hard thing for us to gauge how much he can do, and that's just a problem for us.
Whatever happened with the textile protectionism? It seems to me that Congress has a stain on its hands if it stopped us giving some favorable treatment to Pakistan that might have enabled.
Well, shortly after 9/11, that became an issue.
But I didn't follow what happened with that.
I don't know what's happened lately. At the time, I was critical of the U.S. for not, in exchange for the support that Musharraf was giving us, giving them a break on textile imports. I thought that at that point it was not a failing just of Congress, but also of Bush, because if you remember the political climate right after 9/11, he could have snapped his fingers.
Well, yeah, he should have, but Congress shouldn't have resisted either.
I'm not sure they did. I don't know how it played out, but they were both. Our government was failed in that regard. I mean,
the other really stupid thing they're doing is trying to stamp out the poppy trade in Afghanistan.
You think that's stupid?
I think it's stupid. I think you let them grow their poppies, and you know.
Well, isn't part of it that some of the money goes to support the Taliban or not?
Right, but the other part of it is that our troops are running around trying to burn down the fields of these farmers and destroy their livelihood.
Well, I'm certainly, I'm skeptical of that kind of thing, including in South and Latin America. Yes.
Yeah, and so what's more important, winning the war on terror or having a few more heroin addicts?
Well, they're claiming there's actually a correlation between the two strategies of attacking the drugs and attacking the terrorism. But I don't know what the story is there.
Well, there probably is a little, but your general strategy in mind is that Western-style prosperity will eventually solve these problems. So if the Western-style prosperity is built on growing heroin...
It is in the proud tradition of...
what's so terrible about that?
Of capitalism, to meet that particular consumer need.
And well, it certainly seems that our eradication program has not worked, and it also has the effect of driving up the price and further enriching the Taliban warlords.
Well, it's interesting. That's an interesting point. That when driving up the price is a strategy to reduce the number of drug users in America, that's a point in its favor, and I guess that is actually an effect of this. But it would be crazy to factor that into what we're doing in Afghanistan. So you're right that the cost-benefit calculus is, in that sense, in a very vague way, kind of weaker here than it is in South America. I personally don't like the idea in general of holding all of these nations responsible for our drug problems.
Right.
But anyway, we should, we're still in the foreign affairs realm, and
we should move
on to Jesus.
To Jesus, something more down to earth. I'm a total pillow. I found James Cameron's presentation semi-convincing.
Did you see the actual? Okay, the deal is, Cameron, this director with whom you've no doubt had drinks out there in Hollywood, Mickey.
Yeah,
director of the Titanic.
We're going out later.
Did this documentary and timed the release of this archaeological evidence to support the claim that they'd found Jesus' tomb. You saw the actual TV?
No, I didn't. I just read descriptions of it.
But the basic idea is they found this tomb, and if you look at the names, there's an inscription that says Jesus, son of Joseph, an inscription that says Mary, could be Jesus' mother, an inscription that arguably can be interpreted as Mary Magdalene.
Right.
And Cameron's view, I guess, is that she and Jesus were married. And then there's a couple of names that don't fit in so easily, and they kind of speculatively fit them into the picture.
And they've conveniently not done the DNA testing that would disprove it. It's a story that's too good to check.
Wait a second. They have not done which DNA testing?
Well, they've DNA tested Jesus and Mary and discovered that they weren't related. Jesus and Mary Magdalene.
Correct.
And discovered that they weren't related, so then they theorized that, well, they must have been married then because they're in the same tomb. But they haven't tested them with any of the other people in the tomb. Nor does it get clear to me how they can do this testing, since my understanding is somehow the bones were removed in 1980 when they discovered the ossuary and buried. Why can't they go to the place where they were buried and test that DNA? It's all confusing to me at that point.
I don't know.
They're testing like the DNA of like the dust that's left in these boxes, since there are no bones in these boxes.
Yeah.
And how do they know which dust comes from which person if everybody's buried together?
No, there are individual boxes, I think.
There are 2 boxes.
Only 2?
I think so.
No, I thought there were, anyway, there is, within the larger tomb, there are discrete boxes. I thought there was one per person. But anyway.
I don't think so.
Here's...
It's absurd to argue that James Cameron's doing it for money, since he has more money than he knows what to do with.
Right, but he would do it for the celebrity. I mean, when he gave his Academy Award speech, didn't he strike you as a little bit on the self-involved and annoying side?
Well, he's been accused of egomania from time to time, yeah.
Anyway...
I think he said he was king of the world.
More or less. It went beyond that. But anyway, here's my line on Jesus. First of all, in a slightly lighthearted vein, I would say this. The DNA that they say was Jesus's is mitochondrial DNA. Now, can you imagine what doctrine of Christianity that's consistent with? And that's the only kind of DNA they found, mitochondrial.
Right. Very good point.
Do you know what that means?
It means it's matrilinear, and since, well, no.
Yes. Mitochondrial DNA comes only from your mother.
Oh, well, everybody agrees Jesus has a mother.
Right. But if they had found paternal DNA, that would complicate a doctrine known as virgin birth.
Would it?
I'm kind of joking here.
Okay.
But yes, kind of it would have. I mean,
but
unless...
God doesn't have DNA?
What?
God doesn't have DNA or can't take the form of DNA?
That's the kind of question that would have been raised. Anyway, I have a serious kind of point.
Okay.
I think this is kind of a killer argument against the validity of this claim.
Okay, and then I have an argument from it too. Go ahead.
Okay. Here's what I would have said if the people from Anderson Cooper had asked me, which they probably wouldn't have. And this is not a point that would have survived the cutting room, but you know what you're hearing is they got a statistician to say, okay. I mean, against the claim for validity is that these are all extremely common names. Like, supposedly 1/3 of the people were named something. It was either Joseph or something. So the question is, you know, they look at the probabilities these names had back then and say, what are the chances that randomly, in other words, if this were not the real Jesus, what are the chances that you'd find these names we know are associated with him together? Jesus, son of Joseph, you know, Mary. Right, arguably, blah, 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 blah.
Right, but what are the chances if you looked at 600 coffins that one of them will have that combination?
Exactly. Now, Mickey, see, this is a point that I have not seen. First of all, I have a second point, a related point. But what you keep seeing is the statistician said, well, the chances of this happening randomly are only 1 in 600. So you think, whoa, chances are over 99% that this was not random. This is the real Jesus, right? But you just made the right point. If they had only found one tomb in the whole history of archaeology in the Jerusalem area, then yeah, that would be the relevant thing. You'd say the chances are over 99%. But if the chance in any given tomb of finding that are 1 in 600, then the question is, how many tombs have been excavated in the history of archaeology in Jerusalem without finding this combination? And if it's like hundreds, then the chances are actually very good that through random coincidence you would happen upon this combination of names, right?
Right.
But have you seen a news story that tells us, gives us any idea, even mentions the question of, you know, how many of these tombs have been unearthed?
No.
Okay, moreover, that's only half of my killer argument.
Okay.
Here's the second half. You might ask, how did, you know, as part of the aforementioned calculation of probabilities, they had to have some kind of database. How do they find out what the probabilities of having any of these names was back then? The answer is, according to these news stories, tombs. Okay? Tombs like this.
Right.
They go through and see what the percentage of names is. Well, if they've only found a few tombs, then their confidence, the statistical significance of the conclusion about what the probabilities of different names were is very weak.
So there must have been a lot of tombs.
So there must have been a lot of tombs. Well, no. I mean, either there's a lot of tombs, so it's not surprising that one of them has this combination, right, or there's few tombs, and this statistical foundation of the whole argument is very shaky.
Right.
That's like a killer argument, right?
It seems to be a killer statistical argument, yes.
You don't sound as impressed as I would be if I were just observing this and apprehending it.
No, I'm irrational. I see those names on the, and I say, ooh, that's pretty weird, But
I get no credit. I got to say, when I heard Jesus, son of Joseph, I thought, whoa. But,
well,
if it's true that those were both extremely common names, and they've got, in museums and so forth, there are 1,000 of these tombstones or whatever that say blank son of blank, yeah, you're probably going to get that,
But the really nasty question is, Bob, do you believe that Jesus rose from the dead? And if not, then you think his bones got to be somewhere?
No, I don't think he rose from the dead.
Okay, so at some point, one may discover some of his DNA.
We may.
Okay, so
could happen, but it seems to me very unlikely that we would find it under circumstances that give us any confidence that it is in fact Jesus's.
Right.
I mean, because I'm guessing that maybe the part about his body disappearing from the tomb is true.
Right. What good point. What my point is, it was raised by a guy named Mark Goldblatt in the New York Post, which I'm sure you read every day. What if this was said about Muhammad? James Cameron would have a fatwa on his head. What does it say about it says something about the difference between Christianity and Islam, that while all sorts of priests and authority figures are denouncing Cameron, nobody is resorting to violence. There's no killing anywhere. There are not riots in the streets of Christian cities. And now you're going to come up with some rationalization to defend Islam's honor here.
Well, I just wouldn't say it speaks to a difference between Islam and Christianity. I would say it speaks to the present frame of mind of a lot of Muslims around the world and a lot of Christians around the world.
Really?
It's not. I don't think it's a doctrine. I don't think you'll find in the Quran that I don't think it's a doctrinal issue.
I don't know.
That's what I think. I mean,
I went to hear a talk by that woman who gave that incredible interview on Al Jazeera, and she said, she prayed every morning with, and death be on those, the Christians and Jews who depart from the faith. I don't see any Christians saying, and death be on the Muslims who don't believe in Christianity.
There have been times in history when the Muslims weren't saying that.
That's the argument I thought you were going to make, that the Crusades, and it's a question of relative maturity of the religions.
Well, it's not even quite as directional as that. They both have waxed and waned. It's not like they reach maturity and then, it's all fine. I mean, there's crazy Christians and Jews running around right now, too. There are more radical Muslims in the world right now than there are, by some definitions, than there are Christians or Jews. But I wouldn't say it's kind of this relentlessly progressive thing where they reach maturation and that's it. It waxes and wanes. There have been periods in history when Islam, for practical purposes, was a very tolerant faith.
And you also said that there's nothing in the Koran that says it. Well, there is something in the Koran. I just told it to you. There's this passage.
No, I mean about unearthing the body of Muhammad. I'm not aware of anything that would prescribe. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
But there is an equivalent blasphemy for Islam. That, you can't do a cartoon of the guy that would be punished. Showing his image would be punished much more viciously than James Cameron will be punished.
Well, actually, I don't think that's a doctrine that applies to all Islam. Again, I would attribute that reaction to the political circumstances prevailing more than anything else.
Why can't there be a religion that's worse than other religions? I mean, what is the principle? What is the eternal physical principle, like the Maxwell's equation that says, all religions are benign. You can't have a religion that's worse than others, that punishes blasphemy more viciously and is more sort of sectarian towards other religions.
Because in my experience, the actual practical application of religious doctrine in terms of as it applies to tolerance and things has so much more to do with the facts on the ground than with what's in the Scripture. I mean, Mickey, there's only one place in the Abrahamic Scriptures where genocide is embraced, and that's in the book of Deuteronomy. Okay, you don't find that in the Quran. You don't find wipe out every every man and woman and animal and, and if you look at the famous kill the infidels wherever you find them verse, it is framed by all these qualifiers about, like, unless they are your allies and stuff.
That's nice, but there is this thing that people say every morning in their prayers.
Which is what?
Dr. Sultan,
that's not part of standard Muslim procedure. It's not one of the 5 pillars of Islam, the things that all Muslims are supposed to do. As I said, there's lots of parts of Christian scripture, and there are American fundamentalists who are plugged into some of them, including in Revelations. There's lots of parts of Judeo-Christian scripture that would aid and abet belligerence.
So your claim is that Islamic scripture is no worse or even better than Christian scripture, or is your claim that none of these scriptures have a practical effect because you can be more tolerant?
I wouldn't say they
have
no practical effect.
Okay, but their tolerance level waxes and the tolerance level...
I would just say the main determinant of how tolerant any religion is at any point is not its scripture.
Okay, but
it's things we have control over, and it's like volume knobs that we've been mishandling pretty systematically in recent years, in my view, thanks essentially to the Bush administration.
And as a fallback, you say their scripture is no different.
No, I didn't say the scripture was no different.
Okay, is it better or worse?
I'm not stupid enough to speak so simplistically about something that complicated.
Okay, well, so there's no principle that you're... If there was a piece of scripture that was really bad, you would say it. You would know it when you see it.
There are bad scriptures in both. In terms of the actual exhortation to violence, okay, which is to be distinguished from saying infidels will be punished in the afterlife, the exhortation to violence as a matter of doctrine, I don't think is more robust in the Quran than in the Bible in absolute terms. In terms of, how many instances? Maybe in proportional terms because the Bible is a bigger, longer book with more different kinds of literature or something. I don't know.
Well, the fact remains that in recent times, people who do to Islam what James Cameron tried to do to Christianity have been fairly severely and physically punished in this world.
I don't think that's actually what we're disagreeing about, is it?
Okay. Well, no, but...
Is that I didn't contest that claim, did I?
I don't think if... I don't quite see how if we bring peace to the Israelis and Palestinians that somehow... people who do the equivalent of Cameron to Islam are somehow going to be treated with the tolerance that Cameron will be shown by the Christian world.
So you don't think it would help?
It would help, but I just think...
Oh, so it would help. Are there other things that would help?
Of course I think...
Not invading Iraq, say?
I think there are plenty of things that would help, Bob. The question
okay,
is...
well, if you did a lot of them, do you think it would help a whole lot? Instead of doing exactly the opposite of the smart thing time after time for 6 years in a row?
But I don't think there's any principle of equivalence that says that it would produce equivalence. That's all. I think we've outlined our differences on that one.
Safe to say, and we've spent a long time doing it.
What else we got on the agenda?
Well, you wanted to talk about both the stock market and the male biological clock. At this point, I'm not sure if we're going to talk about viewer comments at all that we can do both.
Okay, I don't think we have that much to say about the stock market.
No, except that it illustrates my favorite theme. Can you guess what that is?
The need for intrusive arms control inspections?
Close.
No, that's not
Close.
it.
Let's just say that...
The need for world government?
No. Let's just say that what turns out to be bad for China is bad for us, and what turns out to be...
Interdependence in a non-zero sum market. Non-zero
sum, excellent. Matt Iglesias kind of made this point in an early blog post in reaction to the Chinese stock market downturn, that it illustrated some interdependence of our fortunes. That's all I have to say.
Except according to Lawrence Summers, there's a huge debate over whether we should bludgeon them into letting the yen appreciate.
But it's very clear what Summers' position is on that, right?
Sorry, what?
Is it clear what Summers' position is on that, right?
Summers' position is that it's inevitable and that they should let it appreciate, but I don't think is he clear on the bludgeoning part?
Oh, yeah. In the op-ed you're talking about, I think in the LA Times, Summers says that in his experience with Japan, and for some of that time he was in the government, putting public pressure on and complaining and exhorting only does bad because it empowers nationalist elements that are then going to oppose what you want. He says that quite clearly in that op-ed, I think.
It's a case where the bad cop in America, namely protecting the industries that are getting killed by the Chinese, doesn't serve an international function but does serve a domestic function. So that's the problem. In other words, it's like with textiles. Ernest Hollings has to make a big noise about protecting the textiles because that's the district he's from. But it's not clear that. But sometimes I guess that's counterproductive internationally. But it's part of the cathartic effect that I was talking about domestically. But okay.
I will give you the last word on all of this if we're going to move on in time to the male biological clock, which you wanted to discuss, possibly for personal reasons. I don't know.
There's this book out about that there is a male biological clock, and that people like me, I'm 55, should not have children because it's not clear why. There are three reasons. One, because people like me are going to be infertile, which so what? So if we're infertile, there's no problem. So that's all BS. Then there's a problem that the sperm will be more defective and there'll be more birth defects. That was pretty unconvincing in the New York Times article. There was for birth defects, the chances rose from 3% to 4%. Well,
Are they defects that are detectable in prenatal screening, do you know?
I don't know that. That's a good point.
It's a good point if you're not pro-life and would actually consider an abortion. It's very relevant.
Right. And the chance of schizophrenia rises to 1 in 47, which does seem a little too close for comfort.
At what age is this?
I think it was after 40. 1 in 47 doesn't seem too good, and perhaps in my case, maybe it's even a little higher, maybe. So, but it's weird that this is a case where there's PC reasons, in both directions. First, they're all the aging boomers like myself who want to have kids later in life who are going to resist this information, strenuously. And against us in the sort of the PC-ness of it all are that there's this sort of men have biological clocks too. There's even a ridiculous line in this New York Times thing about how this levels the playing field between men and women because men will be as desperate to have children as women are when they approach menopause, which is insane. It's not going to level the playing field, even if there is a biological clock for men, as obviously there is, there's still going to be a fundamental asymmetry there. Anyway, and the third argument is just psychological, or that you want to be able to, run and play ball with your kids, and when you get to be my age.
Yeah, but I think that's a crazy one. I mean, the fact is, in terms of your child-rearing behavior through the ages, I'm personally glad that in my 20s I didn't have kids because, you get less temperamental as you age, all other things being equal, I think, and I just don't think I was mature enough. And I just think you're much more likely to have abusive fathers if you start out really early, and not that most are, but I mean it's just more likely. And just, who's to say? Who's to say whether it's good for kids for you to be out playing ball with them or for you to be saying, why don't you come in and watch TV with me, as I sit in my reclining chair? Who knows? That's a ridiculous thing to worry about, it seems to me.
Good, I will stop worrying about it.
You should have kids, Mickey. It's really interesting. And but I'll tell you what's wrong is the common kind of view you have when you're single is that, being single is this kind of exciting, devil-may-care thing, and then the staid conservative thing is to have kids. It's totally the opposite. Having kids is a complete roller coaster ride emotionally, I'm here to tell you. It's the risks you perceive, at least, that you feel are much greater than...
Right. Oh, I'm not sure I'm ready for that. That's the problem. I sort of have a nice
Well,
quiet life.
I mean, look, it's scary in some ways, but it just taps you into a dimension that you will not otherwise, it's the closest thing to unconditional love you can get on this planet, and it's interesting.
Yeah, well,
But, one thing you could do is, if you're worried about the things getting worse and worse on the sperm front, is maybe freeze your sperm.
I don't know. That seems to be that was one obvious implication of the article was that somebody should start a business freezing the sperm of 30-year-old men.
Or why a business? Don't you have a refrigerator?
Bob.
Well, Mickey, I'm always looking for Blogging Heads TV firsts,
That would be a first.
Yeah, well, you're not game, though.
Not right now.
If it was spontaneous, it would be even more memorable.
Yeah, maybe if you were Anderson Cooper, but no.
I don't know what that meant.
Anyway, okay, well, thank you for your encouragement.
Well, Mickey, I've always thought that you had a slightly too narrow conception of, the woman that would be right for you.
Well, no.
I encourage you to broaden your horizons on that front, too. Because, the thing about marriage is it's going to take a huge amount of work regardless to make it work. So just pick a name out of the phone book.
I won't even
just don't make it a name like Pat where you're not sure,
Well, I want to...
I mean, if you want to have kids.
Thank you. There's this one... there's this line in one of these pieces saying, men like me have to decide whether they want to be sperm donors or fathers. And, either one sounds okay to me. But I think sperm banks reject the sperm of aging boomers because we're not motile enough.
Yeah, no, I would only freeze it for your own personal use.
No, I just think there's a potential business opportunity of you become the business agent for aging boomers, and you bribe women into accepting your relatively defective sperm by offering cash, and so that people.
Well, you can do that, Mickey. You can go out now, I think, and find a
Well,
right?
sure, anybody can do anything individually, but my point is if there were, use sperm or something, some site that would organize it, that person could make a lot of money.
Okay.
Placing the sperm, defective
I think you're dodging the personal issue you face, Mickey.
Aging boomers. You don't know what my personal issues are, Bob.
No, but I mean whether to actually go out and, either contract with some woman or... in one sense or another, in the various senses in which you can contract with a woman, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think the less I say about this, the less trouble I'll get myself in, and I've probably already said too much.
I'm ringing the bell here.
Yeah.
I don't want to go there.
Let's don't go there.
The clock is ticking, both the biological clock and the Blogging Heads clock. You want to do comments?
Yeah, well, speaking of which, there is this what do women want thing that... it started out with, our Facebook Blogging Heads site, which, by the way, I think the membership is now up, above 140 or something. So there is growth, but the curve is kind of slacking off a little. So, I don't know, we need some big initiative that spurs the further growth of the Facebook group. I was thinking maybe about using some of our capital, because we have capital now, and using it to, build a shrine to the founder of the Facebook group. His name is Christopher Chappell. And then people could, there could be pilgrimages from all over, Blogging Heads fans all over the world.
Yeah, you always had that shrewd business sense.
That what?
Your P.D. Barnum-like business sense is coming forward.
Right? I think this one's a winner. The Shrine Chapel, the Chapel Shrine. Or the Shrine Chapel.
It could be right next to the Brian Lamb Shrine that you're planning to erect. It could be incorporated into the Brian Lamb Shrine.
So anyway, on the Facebook site, they observed that most of their members, at least, of the Blogging Heads group, were men. Overwhelmingly, they raised the question, what do women want? It's become a topic of discussion. Oh, come on, who describes herself as a female, is a commenter who says, why don't we ask her what women want? And I think some people did, and I think she said some stuff, but I'm not sure if that's actually true. So I'm asking her, maybe she could repeat it in a comment. Also, I encouraged some of our female Blogging Heads to get into this. Ann Althouse did, a reasonably scathing critique of Blogging Heads.
What did she say?
Well, actually, a lot of it seemed gender neutral to me. what she said. There wasn't that much saying, well, women are like this, and that's why they don't like this. I mean, she said there were things about Blogging Heads TV she didn't like, but that's just another way of saying that women don't like Blogging Heads, right? I mean, why is it? I mean, I think she described it as grim and remorseless. Okay, well, why is it that you as a woman would view it that way, whereas if the statistics are right, men are less likely to? Anyway,
she's the only woman we got, practically.
Not true.
We have a few others. Okay.
Not true. Virginia Postrel will show up any moment.
And
Jackie Shire, Megan McArdle. We've had Amy Sullivan.
Excuse me.
I'm probably Anne-Marie Slaughter.
Okay.
And a woman whose name escapes me about a year ago. But anyway, I think we should encourage Ann Althouse to come up with what we just turn her loose. She should do her dream Blogging Heads that women are going to like, and she should decide who she wants to do it with, and if they are game, we will get a camera to them, whether they are in the North Pole or North Korea, wherever, unless it's North Korea. We can't do that. But we will work hard to get a camera to them.
The Bob Wright Estrogen Challenge.
Yeah.
That's good. Although I have a feeling, Ann Althouse is a pretty argumentative person, so that
she'll pick a fight. Oh, she and Eric Alterman.
The idea that she's got to provide a sort of nurturing.
The Althouse-Alterman thing, the alt thing is out of control. I mean, she disses him in the New York Times column, which has the fortunate byproduct of her mentioning Blogging Heads TV in the New York Times. Diss is too strong a word. She takes issue with him.
Okay, so is that your comment on the comments?
Well, the time is growing kind of long. I mean, I guess today is not the day when I will do what I want to do, which is get back to that question of root causes. Why conservatives are less inclined, in a sense at least, to embrace the root causes of bad behavior, to seek the root causes in a very specific way of bad behavior and to embrace that terminology than liberals. I think I have, after I encouraged our commenters to talk about it, it actually led me to think I have more clarity on the situation. But I guess we should just promise to get back to that. Save it for another day.
Yeah, it'll still be around next week or
a couple
whatever.
Of quick, interesting ones. Solid State. After you and I kind of agreed that the perceived moral tenor of America as, purveyed by American media around the world is probably not an asset in the war on terror. We brought up the famous Super Bowl incident. Janet Jackson. Solid State writes that he attended a training school with a Sri Lankan military officer, and this officer had expected to find a group of debauched drug users engaged in constant orgies, indifferent to concerns of family, personal integrity, and self-control. And he was just shocked by the extent to which depictions of normal life, that is, Solid State was, in the U.S., had convinced him of our utter moral vacuity and hedonistic individualism. Interesting. I guess. Homonitis is a viewer in South Korea and encourages us whenever we use the word Korea to modify it to speak of either South Korea or North Korea, so that the two will not be conflated.
Yeah, that was a good post. I like the post by any user about firing teachers. Very sensible post, and it was echoed by there was a Edu Wonk, who is sort of my guru for education, takes a statesman-like middle ground in the firing teachers controversy, where he basically agrees with me, but says it's really not about firing teachers, but relentlessly focusing on effectiveness. And I appreciate, all across the board in hiring and in nurturing a sort of culture of non-mediocrity. But and it's good to get Eddie Wonk's post, but between you and me, it is about firing incompetence.
I'll tell you what I would say as a public school parent. Is it real? I've had situations where I've thought, oh, man, this teacher has tenure. That is so unfortunate. I mean, you get tenure after only 3 years. This is crazy. A plainly terrible teacher, blah, 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 blah. And then you realize If they hadn't been there for 3 years, the person you would be trying to talk into firing them is the person who hired them. And that is the problem, you know. This person, this principal has bad judgment. I've also seen schools where the principal has great judgment. And, but you know, the tenure, the main thing that early tenure does is defend teachers against a change of principal, you know, a change of administration, I think. And sometimes that's unfortunate, and maybe sometimes it's fortunate, and maybe it's more often unfortunate, but it's not the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is the quality of the hire. I agree.
Well, it seems to me it's both. Every organization I've been in where I have performed well, I've been constantly in fear of getting fired. Unlike Blogging Heads TV, where I have no fear of getting fired.
Well, it is true that you don't know for sure, I think, bosses generally have a hard time knowing for sure if an employee is going to be good until they have hired them and observed them. But I would also say that schools are not an environment in which on-the-job evaluation is really very easy.
Yeah. But on the other hand, I mean, I draw the analogy with large journalistic organizations. In other words, the people in the education world are always saying, well, we shouldn't fire teachers, we should reschool them and give them the help they need. Just, you know, that's like telling, like, the LA Times employees, well, we want to put out an edgy, well-written paper, so we're going to, you know, motivate our current employees to put this paper out. No, your current employees are never going to put that paper out. The only way to put that paper out is to fire your current employees and replace them with people who are edgier and better writers and less twittish.
Well, sometimes there are edgy people being constrained by their perception of what's wanted by the management.
Sometimes, but usually it's a swamp of mediocrity, and people don't change that much. And if you know, when it comes to educating kids, you don't have generations of to spare while you bring along these teachers. Yeah. So it makes much more sense to fire them, you know, and start with somebody fresh.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's so. There's this tremendous aversion to saying something nasty like we should fire a bunch of teachers, and even EduWonk, who's about as neoliberal as they come and non-bullshit as they come. Sorry, non-BS as they come. In the education world, shies away from it.
I've definitely seen a number of teachers I was in favor of firing, and the problem, 4 out of 5 times, is that the person who would fire them had the bad judgment to hire them in the first place, and so is unlikely to get around to that. But,
well, principals should be fired too.
Well, yeah, but that's a different problem, is the point.
Not in New York, it isn't. In New York, it's a union problem too.
Mm. Well, I guess it could be a union problem,
but anyway.
Yeah. Well, listen, I've got to go brush up on this elusive distinction between Hezbollah and Fatah, okay?
Hey, it was the allergies. Okay?
Sorry, man. That was a cheap shot. I feel bad about that, what I just said. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm not sure I'm going to accept that. But allergies make you stupid, so...
I know, and I feel for you, man.
And it's going to be a long haul through spring.
Sure is, with that dingle-link floating around.
Thanks a lot, Bob.
Sorry.
Ha, 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 ha.
It could have happened to anybody.
Funny. One day it'll happen to you, Bob.
It has. I did several regrettable things in this dialogue. I'm praying people don't dingle-link. And I shouldn't have mentioned them because you'll spend the night pouring through it.
I thought you were talking about the Fatah-Hamas deal.
I know. It's perfectly, it happens. It's a little minor brain lock thing.
He said defensively.
No, I know.
Okay. Hopefully people will be too bored to even, get that far.
I don't think anybody made it this far. Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay.
They're rewatching that part about Fatah and Hezbollah.
Thank you. Oh, okay.
See ya.
Bye.